Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. We're here because everyone is curious about really learning a little bit more of the do's and the don'ts towards what your senior needs to do before applying to college. And as we get started, I just want to make sure I introduce myself. My name is Justin Clarke. I'm a full-time college counselor and also the associate director of the college counseling team here at Galin. I have over 12 years of experience working with students in the college application process. I spent over 4 years as the assistant director of undergraduate admissions at Northwestern University, where I owned our entirety of our Northeast territory, where I recruited, reviewed, and also admitted roughly about 10% of our incoming class year over year. I'm also a very proud alum of Northwestern University, graduating in 2013 as a political science major. So I bleed purple. And again, Northwestern was my training ground and really started my career working in graduate and undergraduate admissions and also being a college counselor to help families like you all, because this can be a very stressful process, especially with rising seniors who need to do a lot over the next couple of months as they prepare for what begins the admissions process officially in that mid-October to early November. So again, I'm here to hopefully take stress down and answer a lot of questions. So today, or I should say tonight, we're going to be covering a lot, and I'll try to make sure that I fit it into the time that we have allotted. Of course, I'm going to start with the basics, basically your introduction to some of the foundational things on your checkbox that you should make sure you as a family and also your students should be getting started on during this summer, heading into senior year. I'm going to go over some specifics of what should be focused on for the college list. I'm going to touch on finances because whether you're looking for merit scholarships, whether you're hoping for any type of federal student aid or state level student aid, whatever your financial situation is, college as a whole is just really expensive right now. And it's nice to be able to start thinking about that earlier rather than later. And again, to avoid stress when it comes to financials. I'm going to be talking about testing because that is something that usually no student and also no family really enjoys being able to delve into or go through the process of preparing for testing or wondering what's a good score? Is this college going to require scores? What do I need to do when it comes to APs, for example? I'll dive into some, helpful tints, so helpful hints there. I'm also going to be touching about the personal statement because that's something that if your student hasn't already started that, summer is a prime time to be able to make sure that you're putting some well-needed attention there. And then I'm also going to touch on the supplemental essays because as if the personal statement wasn't enough writing for seniors to be required to do, almost every single university that you're probably going to be applying to is going to require some semblance or aspect of a supplemental essay. So I want to make sure I'm talking through that and answering questions there. And also just how to get involved and really how to get help. I'm going to make sure we cover that as well. So without further ado, let's just dive in. Here are the basics. And when we're talking about basics, we're thinking about the kind of foundational, these first things that you really need to make sure that you're doing before you're diving into anything that requires a little bit more depth. So first, you have to create the common application. It is open for students, easily accessible. Your student can add you as an advisor if you want to keep an eye on them. Any parent or anyone else that the student adds as an advisor is going to be able to see their potential progress and how they're filling out and going about their tasks as it equates to filling out the common application. Now, you can't do that for them, but it's a nice way to kind of have an eye watching everything to make sure that they stay on task. One of the foundational things you also have to do is you have to fill out your educational history. A lot of students like to jump around and maybe look towards, oh, let me add my favorite calc teacher as one of my letters of recommenders, or let me get started on adding universities. Before you're really allowed to do anything after you create your common application, they have to fill out their educational history, meaning the high school or high schools that they've attended thus far, all the classes, and I do mean all. I know it's a tedious process that they've taken up until this point, both in high school, but also if they're engaged in any dual enrollment courses, or they might have taken an online course at Columbia over the past summer. Anything educational, it has to be put in line by line. It's tedious, but it's just a requirement as you're getting started. They also have to choose their activities. And for students that are overly involved, this is oftentimes a really hard thing to try and dwindle down because the common application only gives you 10 specific slots to choose your most important or your most impactful activities to be able to put in. And for every student, that's going to be different. Some students want to align that towards the potential major that they're going to be applying in. Say, for example, if you're looking at public health, and you've done a lot of internships or job shadowing or volunteer at the local hospital, that may fill up a fair amount of what you're going to put on your activities list. Other students, they've had their hands in a lot of different things, whether they're on the football team, but also in DECA, maybe the president of the band, and they just have had a lot of passions and a lot of loves in their activities during high school. Whatever your students choose to put it together, again, make sure it's important to them, make sure it's had a solid impact on their life thus far as a young adult, and also make sure that they feel comfortable that's going to be one of the top 10 that represents who they are as a young adult and also as an applicant to the college or university of your dreams. And then the parents, you all, you're not off the hook too. You also have to fill out your parental information. This is usually straightforward and doesn't isn't too tedious to be able to get done. It's just date of birth, your full legal name, where you were born, where you did your undergraduate studies. If you have any graduate level or advanced degrees, also filling them out in your appropriate alma maters, just to make sure that this helps craft for the admissions department the background from parental perspective of where your student is coming from. And just in case your student may be applying to your alma mater, it's great to be able to see like, oh, we might have another future Badger in the mix, or we might have another Wolverine coming down the pipeline. It's not always going to nudge them towards an admit in an applicant pool, but it never hurts to be able to know that they're coming from a sense of shared lineage if that's going to be appropriate for the universities that they're applying to. But again, these are the things that good, bad, or otherwise, you have to get done. It's usually a very good first step to make sure that your student has the foundational aspects of their application solid and done. And then you can move on to things that are usually a little bit more interesting. Things like the college list. This is usually the most fun part of the college process, especially for our seniors in this summer as they're heading into their senior year. When you're putting down the college process, there are so many different opportunities and so many different potential pathways that they could walk when they're thinking about a college or university where they could end up. Right now, there's still over 4,300 domestic based universities, not even thinking of international routes they could take. That is a lot to wade through. So, as you're helping your senior, and as your senior is doing that work, that research, of being able to decide what their college list actually looks like, the first place you want to start is identifying their wants versus their needs. As a college counselor, both as an independent college counselor and also as a former high school college counselor, I'm a really big proponent of what I like to say is the fit factor. And that comes from identifying what things are wants, meaning that if they could have this particular aspect of the university present, they'd be great, but it's not necessarily going to be a make or break. Maybe that could be a winning football program. Maybe that could be going to university where they never have to experience a real Midwest winter ever again. Whatever it may be, you need to figure out what are the things that are a little bit lighter on their list of things they would like to have in their college experience and designate those as wants. And then walking hand in hand with that, we need to identify what are their needs. I like to say these are their red lines where if this university doesn't have this particular factor, whether it's if it's not a top 25 pre-med program, if it doesn't have an advanced way to be able to go into their MBA program, if it doesn't have a men's basketball program they can cheer on during March Madness, whatever it may be for your student, you need to identify the things that, hey, as you're starting to whittle down the list of all the possible places that they could apply to, what are the things that are must? What are the things that are must to be able to have as they go to college? And as you define those wants versus needs, you can start putting those together and really adding character to any university you're looking for and kind of have a percentage of wants and needs that becomes a cutoff for whether you would actually not only apply, but be happy to apply to a place. And if it's going to be worth your while, regardless of rank, proximity to home, or even if it's an alma mater, within your family. Next is research. And I find that this is something that is often hard to get teenagers to do. I say that because, again, there's over 4,300 different universities just in the United States that they could possibly apply to. And usually a lot of high schools aren't great in telling them how to do research. And that's why next on the list is the structured research. You want to make them and really guide them, I should say, in research in a way that is actually going to inform them about the university past reading a Reddit thread or reading College Confidential. They need to be thinking about the academics. What is the student to faculty ratio? What is the average class size? Do they like the faculty members that exist in the department that they're thinking about applying to? Will they be able to have a minor? Will they be able to have a double major? Will they be able to have international programs so they could study abroad? Academics is the bedrock of any college experience, and you want to make sure that you're guiding them to do the due diligence of the place where they're going to be spending the most time. And that's going to be in the classroom on a weekly basis. Next, you want to guide them to research the student life. There's going to be a lot of overlap. There's majority of universities are going to have tens upon more than likely hundreds of student organizations that your student could join and be interested in and find secondary homes on campus. But you need to identify not only do they have clubs that they've enjoyed in high school that they want to continue their involvement in at the collegiate level, is a diversity of campus really important to them? Whether that's going to be a spiritual diversity, whether that's going to be a diversity, they don't want everyone coming from the same state, for example, whether they want socioeconomic diversity or ethnic or racial diversity. You have to think about the folks that you're going to be going to classes with, that you're potentially going to be best friends with over the next 4 years, and that you're also going to be learning from a peer-to-peer standpoint. So thinking about who's going to be to their left and their right as far as the student community that they are joining, that's also very, very important. And the last part of structured research that I'll definitely push forward and give you advice on is thinking about how impactful will attending this university or applying to this university be by the time I graduate? And that's tough. We ask a lot of our seniors. Again, they're only 17, 18 years old, but whether it's from deciding what their major is going to be and how that affects the rest of their life, whether that's from deciding their university and whether that's going to have a great networking opportunity, it's a lot that's put on their plate. And not to add to what's on their plate, but you do have to kind of forecast ahead, whether you know that, hey, after I get out of undergrad, I'm going right into an MBA program, or I'm going to pursue a PhD. If that's the case for either of those, you also have to do some research towards how successful are students once they graduate and walking into the same type of postgraduate academic pathway that your student may be eyeing, or if they want to go directly into the workforce, start looking at if there's any built-in internship programs, if there's any job shadowing programs, if there's an active alumni base where they can have a mentor to really guide them on any mishaps that an older alum may have had while they were in the same shoes as your student that your student could avoid, or they could be a great resource towards an internship that they can bring their resume to the top of the pile. Whatever it may be, again, you want to make sure that you're thinking about and guiding them to do some research towards what are going to be the advantages or the disadvantage of applying to and potentially being accepted and attending any university that they might be putting on their college list, because you have to think about the long-term investment of any university that you're going to attend. And you also have to balance competitiveness. The college list can get really big. Just alone, if you're not applying to a school's university specific application or the UC system, for example, University of California system, I mean, just looking through the common application, which is the most popular way to apply to college, it allows you to apply to up to 20 different universities. I would say usually you don't want to apply to 20 different universities. That's a lot of time, that's a lot of effort, that's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Also, application fees are starting to get up there. That's a lot of money that you may be, putting down as a parent when you're thinking about all the universities that your student is going to apply to. I like to say usually hovering around 12 or so universities is great, but every single student is different. So whether they're going to apply to five, whether they're going to apply to 10, or they're going to apply to 12, you want to make sure that you are balancing the competitiveness of their universities. And by competitiveness, I mean the probability that a student is going to be accepted. In my world and at Galin, as we are guiding a lot of our students, we break down their competitiveness levels into three different main categories. First is a reach. These are the universities that, whether based on your student's academic record or how involved they are, or even just their general acceptance rate or percentage, they are hyper competitive. And when it's a reach, you would usually expect bad news, but you're within striking distance where if you applied early or had an advantage in some way, shape, or form, there's a possibility you could get accepted. But you don't want a college list that's full of reaches. There's a very real possibility if your college list is reach heavy that you may not get any acceptances. And that is the exact opposite of what we want. So those are reaches. Next in the tier below are going to be your targets. Now, these are universities that, based on your academic profile, again, how involved your student is, just their overall profile as an applicant, these are the universities where you would expect them to get accepted. If you're looking at the middle 50 GPA for accepted students, for example, or looking at how their testing aligns with the majority of students that are accepted, they're usually right in that middle 50, the average profile of a student that has success in the admissions process and gets an acceptance, but they're competitive enough where you never know what can happen internally. You can't quite say that it's a slam dunk. So you want to have a solid amount of targets to challenge yourself, but also ensure that you're not being quite as risky as just a list full of reaches. And the last category is going to be your safeties, or sometimes these are also called likelies. The name kind of gives it away, but these are universities that are pretty much slam dunks, whether it's because they have an 80 or 90% acceptance rate, whether because they have a direct admit business program with very clear automatic admissions. And you know that lining up your statistics, your student statistics, what they've done, who they are, with the requirements to be accepted, they are all stars. In their sleep, they can get accepted here. These are also universities that are great to have in your back pocket and are great to be able to kind of cushion the targets and the reaches, which are a little bit more risky. And again, because every single student is different, every single admissions journey is different, and the balance of a college list is going to be different from student to student. Your balance is going to be what makes you comfortable. But from a strategic angle, I would say play the rule of thirds. You know, a third of your total number of universities that you identify should be safeties, a third should be target, and another third should be your reaches. Now, that can always change. If you have one safety that you would be amazed and so happy to attend, and you don't need to apply to any other safeties, then you can add a couple more targets and a couple more reaches. But again, regardless of what that balance is, you have to think about balance as your student is putting together their college list. And then the last guidance I'll give you on the subject of college lists is that early is always better. Nowadays, there's a multitude of different rounds and periods and deadlines that you can apply to the universities and colleges. When we're saying, and when I'm saying, I should say earlier is better, it means that whether it is an early action admissions process where traditionally your student would be expected to have a deadline ranging from anywhere of earliest October 15th to a November 15th, for example, that's when they have to get all their application materials in and submitted. And because it's on the earlier side, you know, right before midterms, right before Thanksgiving break, for example, it's early, it's considered early action, but the benefit of it is non-binding, meaning that any acceptance that you get from this early action round is not going to force your student to move on with that acceptance or matriculate to that university. Now, there's also early decision, which has been around for a fair amount of decades at this point. Early decision is very similar to early action, usually October 15th to November 15th deadline for students. But the biggest difference is that if you are accepted to a university, congrats, but that's the university you're going to be going to. And because you have that binding decision, you only get one shot. You only get one application that you can actually put forward for any early decision round. So a lot of benefits, but a, it's a big decision for your student. Now, in addition to these two main early rounds, some universities are even more flexible and they will give you what's either known as a rolling admissions process, meaning that as early as their application opens, which for all universities, August 1st is when they officially open via the common application and many school specific applications as well. Anytime from August 1st until whenever their end of the year deadline is before the summer, you can apply via rolling admissions process. Usually 3 weeks later, you're going to get a decision. So that can be caught up, you know, in the early admissions process as well. And then the last way to apply early is called early decision round two. This is a newer phenomenon in college admissions, and it's pretty much the exact same thing as your regular early decision round, but usually you have to apply via common application by early January, and then by mid-February, you'll get a decision back. It's just another way for universities to offer you to apply earlier than you would if you applied regular decision and to get a quicker decision back to you. Now, again, Regardless of which four of those routes you may be pursuing, as you're putting together your college list, think about how many early action colleges do I have? How many early decision possibilities do I have? Does any university offer a rolling or early decision round two possibility? Because again, the earlier that you put your college list together, the earlier that you identify your admissions rounds that you can pursue, the quicker you and your student are going to be done with this process and not have to deal with the headache of college admissions, hopefully ever again. But again, those are just some tips and tricks when it comes to the college list. And next up, what everyone loves to talk about is finances. You have to talk about them. I can't stress this enough. And not just, amongst yourself as a parental unit, but also with your student. Because as they're putting together your college list, they need to be aware of any financial concerns or constraints that play into that college list. Because it's never any fun for a student to get admitted into the colleges or the college of their dreams. And then when you get your financial aid package back, it's just not going to work. It's going to be a financial cost to them attending that is going to do undue harm to them as an individual student, or if you're trying to support them in their college endeavors, to you as the family unit. So try to figure out a way, a time, to be able to talk about the finances with your student sooner rather than later. And towards those finances, I definitely push you to complete both ways that universities are going to identify your financial background and any type of scholarships or state level or federal level funding and support that they can offer. The first way is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This traditionally opens up October 1st every single year for the following admissions period. But you can always retroactively look back at the type of questions that they're asking, the type of financial information that they need, the type of tax returns and tax information that they need to get a heads up as you're approaching that official opening date of October 1st on a year by year basis. So definitely start getting those materials together. Now, similar to the FAFSA is the CSS profile. The main difference in the CSS profile versus the FAFSA is that there's a smaller number of colleges and universities that utilize the CSS profile. And the CSS profile is going to be a bit more in depth in the type of financial information and financial context that it seeks to gain from the family unit and from the student, just in case they have a part-time job or a savings account or anything that might also need to be taken into account. So regardless of which one you run into, whether it's the FAFSA or the CSS profile, definitely utilize those. Look up early what your university is going to need as far as the information and start to get your ducks in a row. And a great tool towards that exists on every single college or university's financial aid webpage is going to be your net price calculator. This allows you to pretty much do a mini FAFSA and a mini CSS profile, put in your relative financial information, and get a strong, though not 100% accurate, but fairly accurate kickback towards what you can be expected to receive in terms of any scholarships, any type of funding from a state or federal level, and what's going to be your expected family contribution specifically for that university. It's a great tool to utilize. I push any family on the financial front to really leverage that tool early and often because knowing is half the battle. And you don't want to go into any potential university or admissions process without knowing what your financial situation may be. So definitely leverage those tools that are available. Next, we have testing, which is pretty much the bane of any high school student's existence, and also maybe not the favorite thing to talk about for a family unit or parents as well. Now, when it comes to testing, and to test or not to test, every school is different. Some schools are still test optional, meaning that if you send them testing, great. They will consider it in line with your others' academic information that is going to be submitted by your student. But it also means that if you don't send them testing, it's not required, and they will not consider it whatsoever within the academic profile for your student in the overall admissions process. So that's test optional universities and colleges. Some universities are going back to being test required, meaning that whether it's the ACT, whether it is the SAT, or AP tests, for example, they do need some type of official standardized testing to be sent along with the academic information for your student in order to render an official admissions decision. You putting together your what universities actually need testing? Do I need a certain score? What's their average SAT versus what's their average AP score needed if I want to get out of maybe intro to econ, for example? You need to understand that every school is different and you have to look at every single university's specific admission requirements to get a thorough understanding of what type of testing you need to do or testing that will not even be considered. Because again, as you research that middle 50 percentage, of the students that are accepted that submit testing, you have to see if you're within that 50 percentage to also designate how competitive a university may be for your student. And if you're ever in doubt, the best advice I can give you is to get help. Even though it seems like the summer isn't that long, and we're already into the summer for the majority of students, it's never too late. At Galin, we work with folks across the spectrum, and we have many different testing packages, testing links, test prep styles to be able to meet you where you're at and to be able to push you towards and make sure you are supported towards the type of testing goals that you have before it's too late. But I will say earlier is better because you want to make sure you're planning your schedule. There are a multitude of testing dates, both on the side of the ACT and the SCT, that exists on a year by year basis. And even thinking about the summer, there's a multitude of testing dates that are going to be available from now before you have to start applying in that mid to early to mid November area. Now, I'll say plan your schedule starting now because a lot of testing centers and a lot of testing dates are starting to get signed up very, very quickly. And you don't want to wait until the last minute and possibly not have anything available in your city, possibly have to drive maybe an hour or 2 hours away to do a test. And that just adds even more undue stress onto the test taker. So definitely plan your schedule. This is probably my favorite part of getting ready for our seniors right now. And this is kind of figuring out who you are, or like the essays, for example. And that's really all the essays are. They're an opportunity for the admissions committee, they're an opportunity for the admissions director or the admissions counselor to be able to see that outside of the testing, outside of the amazing grades you've received during high school, outside of being an all-state athlete, for example, there's an actual human with a personality, with a sense of humor, with a passion and with a love for life that exists on the other side of this application. And they gauge that through two different ways. The first is the personal statement. I like to say this is your student's calling card. It is going to be an essay of up to 650 words that reflects who they are. And I'm saying that in a very broad manner because there's 7 different prompts they can choose from, ranging from tell us about something you've had to overcome in your life, or tell us about a beautiful nostalgic memory that you've had in your life, or open response, write about whatever you want. At the end of the day, it just has to be focused on who they are as an individual, and it has to showcase that again, there's a living, breathing young adult on the other side of this application. Now, when it comes to the personal statement, my advice, especially for seniors in the summer, start early, meaning start now if they haven't already. Being able to work on this over the months of the summer takes away a lot of the work that they may have to juggle when they head back to school in August and they're taking their most rigorous course schedule. They're going to probably be leaders of a lot of different extracurricular activities, and they're all over just busy because they need to be an actual young adult as well. They're going to the movies, they're going to concerts, they're excited about homecoming. They're trying to make those beautiful last round of high school memories as a senior. And if they start early with a personal statement, they don't have to juggle that alongside everything else that they're trying to do during the traditional academic year. And they also, as you start early, they need to inject personality. If you're helping them with the writing process or if they're working with college counselors at Galin, you'll also hear this, but you need to inject personality in whatever they choose to write about. Again, a lot of things that they're going to put in their application, it's going to overlap with other students, whether it's their test score, whether it's being the president of the band, for example. These are things that when universities are receiving tens of thousands, or sometimes the bigger universities, over 100,000 different applications every single year, you can't help but overlap with somebody else's story. But by injecting personality, by injecting uniqueness, by injecting passion into the personal statement, it allows them to stand out. And again, if you start early, you give yourself a lot more of a runway to be able to start to inject that unique story that your student has. Second way that they're able to really differentiate themselves and prove that they're human on the other side of their application is via their supplemental essays. You want to create a schedule for these. Depending on how many universities that your student is going to be applying to, on average, you can kind of forecast at least two supplemental essays per university. So we do quick math. Say, for example, they're applying to 10 different universities. That's at least on average 20 essays, ranging from short personality focused questions of 50 words to longer, in depth, philosophical, intellectual questions of 500 words that they're going to have to tackle and they're going to have to write by the time that they are applying. And if you're taking my earlier advice of applying early, the time is starting to tick on knocking out all of those supplemental essays. So the best thing you could do, create a schedule, whether it's day by day, whether it's week by week, whether it's month by month, anything that you can do to create a schedule of, hey, during this period of time, I'm going to be working on and finishing all of these essays. I'm going to move on to this essay. It makes things a lot more manageable. It makes them a lot more doable in a bite-sized manner. And it hopefully keeps a lot of sanity in the household as you all are pushing forward and you're trying to support them and knocking out all the supplemental essays that they have before them. And you also got to realize there's definitely going to be overlap. Many universities, as unique as they try to make themselves be, and as specific as they try to make their supplemental essays, it's not rocket science. So there's going to be overlaps, whether everyone is usually going to ask a version of, why are you applying as this major? Why are you passionate about it? Or what are you going to bring to our community? And what does community mean to you? Or what do you want to do after college? And how is our university going to get you from A to B? Those are some of the three most commonly seen supplemental essays. They're going to be worded different, but those are some of the ones you can expect. And as you create that schedule, if you're doing your research and you're seeing, oh, University of Virginia has this essay, and also USC has this essay, let me work on them at the same time. Work smarter, don't work harder. Because again, with the months starting to tick away during the summer, it's going to make your life and your teenager's life a whole lot easier and less stressful. I definitely do mean that. I think I'm right on time as far as saving about 15 minutes or so before we wrap up. Um, any questions? And I'm going to first go to the chat box to answer those. And then as I'm answering these couple questions that we do have, please add them via the chat or directly via the Q&A section as well. So the first question I see is, if a student is only applying to University of Wisconsin-Madison, Missouri, do you still recommend the common application? So that's a good question. And to answer this, I'll say that this is really getting to the heart of universities that exist on two different platforms, both the common application and also the either for Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin system application, and similarly for Missouri, for example. There's no wrong way to go about this. The one thing I will say, though, is from a tracking standpoint, if you apply via the common application, it allows you to see the work that has been done. It allows you to see bit by bit by bit all the universities that have you worked on, that you submitted, that you still yet to submit, for example. And then in terms of the other aspects of things you have to send, namely your transcript or your letters of recommendation, it's usually easier for your high school to only have to worry about one system. And a lot of the systems that your high school and your high school college counselors will use, a Naviance, for example, comes to mind. Again, they are directly connected with the common application. They can send everything that you need, whether as soon as first quarter or first semester grades are ready, they can shoot those out automatically to the common application. And it just makes things a little bit easier on their side. So I'll say again, there's no one way to go about this. There's not going to be an advantage or a disadvantage in terms of your chances of being admitted if you go a school specific application versus the common application. I'll just say for most parties involved and for most of the materials that you are going to be sending off on behalf of your student, common application usually creates less headaches. The next question I have is, if your student is above and significantly above that middle 50% for testing or GPA, for example, are the odds very good for getting in? And this is really going towards trying to figure out how to structure what's a reach, a target, or a safety. This is a great question. And I'll say when it comes to looking at your student's academic profile and then being a significant margin above whatever metrics are used in that middle 50% of a school you're looking at, usually that would make it a target. And depending on if they are significantly above, and the university or college isn't highly selective or moderately selective, then it could even potentially be a safety where they're a slam dunk. The reasons why I'm using a little bit less specific terminology like usually is because, say, for example, your student is applying to a university where their middle 50 percentage is a 32 or 32 on the ACT and a 3.8 unweighted GPA. Your student is a 36 ACT and a 4.0 GPA. That's great. But this is where the usually comes in. If they only have a 15% acceptance rate, you never quite know what's going to happen during that review process. And I say that honestly, coming from my background in Northwestern, when I was there, still competitive, not quite as competitive as now. But when I was there as a director, our middle 50 was usually around a 32 or 32. Our acceptance rate plummeted down to almost roughly about 7%. We were in top 10 universities and still believe we are. So go Cats. And that made it a little bit more difficult for students that say were 34 or 35 and perfect GPA to still be a shoe in to get accepted. Even though if you're looking at it statistically, that's a strong amount above what would have been our middle 50 percentage. And I say that because there's a lot that goes on internally as far as institutional priorities that as an applicant, as a parent, as a family unit, you will never be privy to. But there were times that whether it was, hey, we just introduced a brand new major in this particular school, the dean wants this many students there, make it happen. So students that maybe didn't apply just that year as the right major, and if they would have maybe switched their major, they definitely would have been, an acceptance may have gotten deferred into regular decision from early decision round one, or they may have just gotten denied because you don't have enough seats. And there's so much institutional just bureaucracy or priority that goes on with the really selective universities or even the highly selective universities. And by highly selective, I mean accepting 25% or less of their students, that it's better to be safe than sorry. So I would say if your student is strongly above the middle 15% academic profile for admitted students, you deserve to put your application in. That's first and foremost. And then if they're not one of those highly selective 20, 25% or less acceptance rates, you could at least put that, as a target. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. These are good questions. Any other questions I could possibly answer for you all? Again, I know the summer's here, the summer is moving fast, and there's a lot to do for our seniors. Okay. Well, I'll say if there's no other questions, definitely say that a resource for all of you all is going to be our app camps that are coming up. Um, Again, we offer a wide berth and a wide suite of services officially through our college counselors. But one of the things that is a little bit easier to be able to tap into is our application camps. We have three different sessions. They're June 23rd to 26th, July 14th to that should be the 17th, apologies, and then August 4th to the 7th. The daily schedule is 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., of course, with breaks for food. And the purpose of the app camp is in a short amount of time to force your seniors to sit down, to go through the common application, to ask questions, to work on their personal statement, for example, to get feedback from our college counseling team, and to really just have a lockdown just session of only college work. And this is great for students that may be too busy to be able to set up individualized meetings. They may be on international trips or vacations, or they may be going through a college recruitment process. Whatever it is, these are three different opportunities that are going to be amazing for them to be able to sit down and knock out a fair amount of work towards the college application process. You can register at our website and also directly at the link, gallup.com/appcamp backslash, really easy to remember. And again, these are great opportunities for you to be able to just tap in and make sure you get some support. In addition to those, if you want to officially sign up, whether it's on an hourly basis or one of our other more inclusive packages from now before things get a little bit too deep into the summer and you need that level of support for your senior for them to cross the line, you can email us at info@galined.com. We can tell you all about our college counseling services and our availability. And if you have any specific questions for me, I'm always available. Just reach out to me at justin.clarke@galined.com. So again, reach out, let us know if you need any support. I hope that tonight was really informative and helpful for you all. And please know that you're going to get through this. We would love to help. We're here to help, whether it's on test prep, whether it's on college counseling, because this is a team effort and we would love to be a part of your team. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. Please reach out should you need anything or you have any additional questions. And take care. Have a good admissions journey. And hopefully, we'll see you in that journey so we can support you. Take care, everyone.